Okay, we are going to learn one last method for solving quadratic equations, and this is called the quadratic formula. So we're going to jump into it here today with a little warm-up, a little evaluating. Do you remember how to evaluate? So here's our expression, b squared minus 4ac. Evaluate what would this value be if a was 3, b is negative 10, and c is negative 2. So plug those numbers into the right spots and actually use your order of operations to figure out the value of that expression. Go ahead and pause your video and find out. Okay, so it is extremely important to use parentheses when you are evaluating things, especially when you have negatives involved. No matter what, I always use parentheses just so that I don't miss a little detail here or there. Even if it's a positive number I'm plugging in, I still put it in parentheses, okay? So I see that my first thing here is b squared. So I'm going to have to put the negative 10 in those first parentheses. I want negative 10 squared. Do you see how important those parentheses are already? I'm hoping it's jumping out at you. After that, it says negative 4a. A was 3, so a goes in that first one. C was negative 2. So it should be negative 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. Now, it's extremely important that you watch your parentheses and watch your negatives, right? Negative 10 squared is negative 10 times negative 10, which gives me positive 100. And that's where those parentheses are crucial, right? Okay, now I have negative 4 times 3 times negative 2. Now we could do the, pick 2 and get it and then multiply our third, but I think we could do it all at once. Mental math here says 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. It's 24, but is it positive 24 or negative 24? Here's a negative. Negative 4 times 3 times negative 2. I have two negatives there. Two negatives make a positive. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12 times negative 2 is positive 24. So it needs to be 100 plus 24. Be careful, okay? And then I get 100 plus 24, which gives me 124. Hopefully you got that correct value. Now, it seems that this skill is completely disconnected from what we're doing, but it's not anymore. It will come into play in today's lesson a ton. So watch your parentheses when you plug something in and watch your negatives. All right. So let's think of all of our ways here that we use to solve our quadratic equations, because here's another quadratic equation to solve. I have x squared minus 4 equals 2x. The first method I practiced was square roots. But we said we can never take the square root of x, so I cannot take a square root here because I have x squared and I have x, so square roots is out. Let's see, I did completing the square, but in completing the square, I had to have my x term would have to be over here. So it's not set up for completing the square. It's not ready to go. Okay. We just finished up talking about factoring, right? Solving by factoring. Well, maybe I could solve by factoring. If you think back, let's see, solving by factoring, I had to get everything on one side, had to put them in order, right? X squared, plain x, then number, equals 0 if I wanted to solve by factoring. So I could subtract 2x from both sides. I'm going to put it in the right order. I'm going to put it here between the x squared and the negative 4. Oops. So I'm going to have x squared minus 2x minus 4 equals 0. Now, if I was going to solve this by factoring, I'd have to do my factor box here, right? X squared, negative 4 on top, negative 2x down in the nook. Obviously, this is x times x. 4 and 1, negative 4 and 1. Nope, that's not going to work. 4 and negative 1, that's not going to work. How about 2 and 2? Negative 2 and 2, that would give me 0. Oh no, the factor box doesn't work. Wait a second, I can't square root, I can't factor, I can't complete the square. What the heck am I going to do? Does that mean it's a no solution? The answer is no. It does not mean it's no solution. It means we need a new method. So this is our final method that we can use to solve a quadratic equation, and it is called the quadratic formula. Now, this formula seems very complicated. However, there are tons of songs and things out there that will help you remember it. I will let you look them up, or we'll probably play them in class, but there are some really, really good ones. I would sing for you, but my singing voice is not great. Actually, I'll probably end up singing for you by the end of the lesson. But the quadratic formula says this: x equals negative b plus or minus big square root sign of b squared minus 4ac. Ooh, is that looking familiar from your warm-up? All divided by 2a. Notice that entire right-hand side, that 2a is underneath the whole thing, not just the square root part, but the whole thing, okay? Now, you might be wondering, like, what the heck, where are these a, b's, and c's coming from? Well, the a, b's, and c's come from standard form. Standard form is when you line all the things up correctly. X squared's first, then plain numbers, then x's, then plain numbers equals 0. ax squared plus bx plus c. So let me switch here. A is the coefficient of x squared. B is the coefficient of x. And c is the plain number, the constant, right? But notice that your equation has to equal 0 for you to be able to find a, b, and c. And then all you have to do is just plug them into the right spots up in your equation, right? Wherever you see a B, it goes here. Wherever you see the A, it goes here. And the C goes here. And then you just plug all those numbers into those right spots, and then you can solve that way. Now, quadratic formula can be used on any quadratic equation. Will work for any quadratic equation. However, as you are going to see, and when we actually start practicing doing this, there are a lot of tiny details that can go very wrong with this quadratic equation, and it is not a short method. There is a ton of work for these. So because there are a lot of potential little mistakes, and because it's a lot of work, this should always be your last resort. Try every other method first and then do the quadratic formula, because this is a ton of work. You can do it. It will work on any quadratic equation out there. Keep in mind, there are some that have no solutions, as we've encountered before, but your quadratic formula will show that as well. So you can use the quadratic formula on any quadratic equation, but it's too much work to do on every quadratic equation. Only use it when there's no other choice. So let me show you how it's going to work. We're going to go back up to this problem that we just eliminated all other options for, right? And we're going to use the quadratic equation. X equals negative b plus or minus big square root b squared minus 4ac, all going inside. The whole thing is over 2a. So I just wrote it here so that we could reference it as much as we needed to. Do I have my equation in standard form? Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. I sure do. So I always make sure that I start by writing down what is A, what is B, and what is C, just so I get all my negatives correct before I plug them into the quadratic formula, so that I make sure that I'm plugging the right numbers in. It's also very easy to go back and check my work and make sure I plug the numbers into the right spots. So remember that a is the coefficient of x squared. Since there's no number written, remember that that's the invisible 1. But notice a is just 1. It's not 1x squared. There's no x's in a, b, and c. It's only the coefficients. B is the coefficient of x, which would be negative 2. The negative goes with the number there. C is the plain number. C is negative 4. Okay? Now, I have A, B, and C written down, so now I'm going to set up my quadratic formula right here, but I'm going to use parentheses for all my placeholders, just like I did in the warm-up when I'm evaluating this expression, when I have numbers to plop in, right? I do this every single time, okay? Use parentheses in every single spot. So it says negative b, so that's negative 2 going in the parentheses. Do you see how important those parentheses are already? 2 negatives here, gonna make a positive. And then inside the square root I have b squared, so negative 2 going here, minus 4ac, so a is going here, and c is going next. C was negative 4, all divided by 2a, so 2 times 1 down at the bottom. So now I have numbers plopped into every single spot, right? Now all I do is start simplifying. Use those order of operations. We know how to do it from here. I see 2 negatives make a positive, so x equals positive 2, plus or minus. Let's see what I could do here. Negative 2 squared gives me positive 4, right? Be careful, watch your negatives here. I can do negative 4 times 1 times negative 4 should give me positive 16, right? 4 times 4 is 16. I have 2 negative signs, so that means that my answer will be a positive 16. And the whole thing is divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, so notice I'm just simplifying, just chip away at it a little bit, right? Okay, now the next thing, x equals 2 plus or minus radical 20 over 2. You know what, I'm gonna move that so that we have more room. Okay, 2 plus or minus radical 20 over 2. All right, now I don't have a perfect square here, but we know how to simplify that radical. We've done it before. So this radical 20 breaks into the square root of 4 and the square root of 5. Okay. Square root of 4 is a perfect square, so I'll have x equals 2 plus or minus 2 radical 5 over 2. Now you'll see, oh, hang on. I got a lot of numbers on the outside here, right? 2 on the outside, 2 on the outside, 2 on the outside. I could simplify all this, but I will say be careful. Please think of that whole top as inside of parentheses. Think of this whole top as one thing, because otherwise it's too easy just to cross off these and not remember that last one. So instead, my suggestion is factor out the GCF of 2. Think of it as factoring out, so I'll have 2 times 1 plus or minus radical 5 divided by 2. So I just factored out that GCF of 2 on the top. And now I can just get rid of those 2's on the outside. So x equals 1 plus or minus radical 5. Now we've had answers that look like that before, especially when we use completing the square, right? This was a pretty crazy one because I wanted to make sure that you see how you can do it for any quadratic equation. When no other method works, the quadratic formula will work, okay? That was a very complicated, in fact, that was about as complicated as a problem can get, and I know it's your first problem, but don't worry, we'll go through it, we'll practice it, it'll get better. You're not gonna have to do all of that on every single problem, but I wanted to start with a problem that couldn't be done by any other method. All right, so let's try another problem. Now, we're going to practice using the quadratic formula on all of these problems. On everything you do today, I want you to use the quadratic formula. Many of these could be done with another method, and that's okay in the future, but I want you to practice using the quadratic formula today. Many times when you can use another method, the quadratic formula is a little bit easier, and so that's why I want you to start practicing with these easier ones. But everything we do today will be with the quadratic formula. So we always start by checking to see if we have standard form, which we do. It's already in standard form. Woohoo! So I go through and I figure out what is A. All right, A in this one is 2. What is B? Positive 3 for this one. What is C? C is negative 5. Okay, so now my quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, all inside the square root, the whole thing divided by 2a. So let's get it ready here. with our parentheses ready to plop our numbers into the right spots. All right, so let's see, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. I put all my numbers in the right spots there, and now I start simplifying. So let's see, only one negative here, so this is a negative 3 out front, plus or minus 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, times negative 5 is positive 40. Positive 40, so it'll be plus 40. Whole thing divided by 4. Okay. Make sure that's a plus 40 on the inside. Now I'm just going to simplify a little bit more on the inside. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 49 all over 4. Ho ho, check that out. Now, this one is a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier because square root of 49 is a perfect square. So this becomes negative 3 plus or minus square root of 49 is 7. Not the square root of 7, just 7. So I have negative 3 plus or minus 7 over 4. Now, at this point, we're not done right now. I can actually break this into two different equations. One where it's negative 3 plus 7 over 4, and one where it's negative 3 minus 7 over 4. So you see how I just took that plus or minus and I broke it into the two separate options, one with plus, one with minus. That's what you're going to do if it's a perfect square, if you don't have a radical there anymore, right? If the radical has to stay, if you have to simplify it, it's not a perfect square, or you can't simplify it all, then just leave the plus or minus in your work. But if you don't have a plus or a radical anymore, then split it into the two and actually solve each one. So let's see, negative 3 plus 7 gives me 4 over 4 on the top one. Negative 3 minus 7 gives me negative 10 over 4 on the bottom one. 4 over 4 is 1. Negative 10 over 4, I can divide both of those by 2, and I get negative 5 halves. So I get 1 and negative 5 over 2 as my two answers for this one. Notice we're still finding two answers for our quadratic equations, just like we've been seeing on all the other methods, right? Two solutions. In fact, this last one, 1 plus or minus radical 5, that's two solutions, right? That's 1 plus radical 5 and 1 minus radical 5. All right, so as you can see, that one was a little bit easier. Now, if you get those regular numbers like that as an answer, that means you could have factored it. But again, today, on every single problem that you do, no matter what, we're going to practice the quadratic formula. In the future, we'll be practicing using the most efficient method. Today, though, just practice the quadratic formula. All right, here's our next one. X squared equals 4x minus 3. Now, hopefully it's jumping out at you. Oh my goodness, this is not in standard form. So we need to move some things around before we're ready to find A, B, and C, right? So you could just subtract x squared. For some reason, in me, it's kind of ingrained in me that x squared stays positive. So I tend to move both of the other numbers to the other side and keep that x squared positive. It just, to me, seems a lot easier than making it a negative. I don't know why. So I'm going to say x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Now, the cool thing is, you could actually do it the other way. You could move the x squared to the right, get negative x squared, and have positives on the other ones, and you'll still get the same answer. Your work will look a little bit different, but you'll get exactly the same answer, so that's another really cool thing about the quadratic formula. So again, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing divided by 2a is our quadratic formula. Starting out by finding a, which is 1, b, which is negative 4, and c, which is positive 3. All right, get it all set up with my parentheses. Oops, didn't make it go far enough this time. There we go. Okay, plug everything in the right spot. Negative b, two negatives in that one, be careful. Plus or minus square root of b squared, negative number in parentheses, be careful. And then I've got 4ac divided by 2a. So I've got all my numbers in my right spots now. Okay, watch those negatives on this one. Two negatives make a positive, so we start with x equals positive 4 plus or minus square root of, let's see, negative 4 squared is positive 16. Negative 4 times 1 times 3 gives me negative 12. There's only one negative sign on this one, not two, so make sure that stays as a negative in there. And the whole thing is divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay, x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 over 2. All right, we've got another perfect square here. That's fantastic. Square root of 4 is 2. So moving on up here, I have x equals 4 plus or minus 2 over 2. Since I don't have a radical anymore, this is where we're going to break it into our two equations. One where it's 4 plus 2 over 2. One where it is 4 minus 2 over 2. 4 plus 2 is 6, so I have 6 over 2 on the top. 4 minus 2 is 2, so I have 2 over 2 on the bottom. 6 over 2 is 3 as one of my answers. 2 over 2 is 1 as my other answer. So 3 and 1 are my two answers for this quadratic equation. So hopefully you're getting the hang of it. Remember, you got to make sure that your equation is in standard form first. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 in order to find a, b, and c. That was the big idea on this one. All right. Let's see what's happening on the next one here. This one, again, not in standard form to start with. So let's move that 1 as our first step. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Make sure it goes at the end. X squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Hopefully at some point here you're going to be starting to remember this quadratic equation, or quadratic formula, I should say. A in this equation will be 1. B in this equation is 2. C in this equation is 1. All right. Getting it all set up. All right. B, negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c. All right, those were pretty easy to plug in. Hopefully you got everything in the right spots. Watching our negatives on this one, x equals negative 2, plus or minus 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 1 is just negative 4, right? Only one negative sign here, so my answer will stay minus 4. 2 times 1 is 2 on the bottom. Okay. Oh, minus 4 inside there, so I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus square root of 0 over 2. Now, some people start to freak out and panic here. Don't worry. The square root of 0 is 0, right? What times itself gives me 0? Yeah, that would be 0. So this kind of just cancels out, right? It's negative 2 plus or minus 0. So it becomes x equals negative 2 over 2. I don't know, maybe okay, negative 2 plus or minus 0 over 2. If you add 0 or you subtract 0, you get the same thing, right? So this is really my one and only option is just negative 2 over 2. Plus 0, minus 0, I get negative 2 over 2 no matter what. So my answer here then would be negative 1. So here I only have one solution. Did that happen before? Yeah, it did. Remember when I was factoring and the both factors were exactly the same? I only got one answer. Does it happen very often? No, it doesn't happen very often, but it can. And it still can happen even when you're solving with the quadratic formula. So I wanted to show you one of those today. All right, this is the last one here. So again, we're going to put our equation into standard form since it's not in standard form already. And again, ingrained in me is to make sure that that first number is positive. So I'm going to add x squared and I'm going to add the 2. X squared is going to go in front, 2 is going to go at the end. So I'm going to have positive x squared minus 2x plus 2 equals 0. But again, you could just add the 2x to the other side. Your negatives will be opposite, but that's okay. You will still get the same answers. All right. Get my quadratic equation set up here. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Told you I'd sing before the end of class. I definitely sing that song all the time when I'm doing these problems. So in this one, a is 1, b is negative 2, c is positive 2. Get my spots all set up. Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, so negative b squared minus 4ac, a is 1, whoops, b is positive 2. Everything in its right spots here. Okay, watching my negatives to start out with. 2 negatives make a positive, so I get x equals positive 4 plus or minus. The square root negative 2 squared again is positive 4. Let's see. Negative 4 times 1 times 2. So negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Again, notice only one negative sign here, so my answer stays negative. Whole thing divided by 2. Oh, wait a second. X equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 8 is negative 4 divided by 2. Wait a second. Can you take the square root of a negative number? Not in the real world, right? So as soon as I get this square root of a negative number, if there's a negative on the inside, I'm going to go back and I'm going to double check and I'm going to make sure that I have my negatives right in the step before that. Yeah, okay, negative 4 times 1 times 2, double check. A is positive 1, B is positive 2. Okay, I didn't miss any negatives. That's it. That's legit. So once I have the square root of a negative number, that means that I have no solution. Did I have some no solutions in my other methods? Yeah, I sure did. Whenever I took the square root of a negative, I got a no solution. So it's still showing up here with our quadratic formula as well. So that's what I mean by the quadratic formula will work for any quadratic equation. You can set it up and find out, and if it's a no solution, it's still going to show a no solution even with the quadratic formula. Otherwise, it's going to give you your answers no matter what, but it is not a short method, right? Look at all of that work. We only did 5 problems today, but it feels like we've done 25 because there's so much work that goes into it. So big takeaways from today. Yes, you can do it for any quadratic equation, but it's a lot of work, a lot of places for little mistakes, so use it as a last resort. Today, you're going to do every problem with the quadratic formula so that you can practice. No matter what, use the quadratic formula today. After this, we're going to start showing you how to find the most efficient method, but today, use the quadratic formula to practice. Don't forget, you have to have your equation in standard form first. Remember standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Big idea here is make sure that it says equals 0 and put those terms in order, biggest to smallest, x squared, x, plain number. Okay, and watch those negatives. And then here's the reminder of what the quadratic formula is, although I recommend looking up on YouTube some good quadratic formula songs because there's some good ones out there.